Okay, we're live. Hi, this is William Ramsey. Welcome to William Ramsey Investigates. On today's show, I have a very special guest, returning guest. His name is John Brisson. He runs the We've Read the Documents YouTube channel, and I've had him on a few times. I actually just reposted one of the interviews that was very well received. I got a lot of positive feedback from it. It was about the Council on National Policy. A lot of people didn't know about that, me, myself included. So I would recommend going back. Within the last week, I've uploaded that. But in the farther back in the past, we talked about the finders. John has done a lot of independent research into the finders. He's actually publishing a book in parts on his Substack, and I'll put a links to that book, but he's been published so far. I think he's published a couple episodes so far on his Substack.
I published about 90 odd pages of the book so far. I got about 150, 180 of it written, but I'm kind of doing it in chronological order, publishing it. So
awesome. Well, congratulations. And that other show, there was a lot of stuff about the finders I didn't understand. I had kind of a topical understanding, but now I see it much broader within the context of a lot of intel and child trafficking and stuff like that. So there might be some difficult, uncomfortable subject matter we're talking about if we're talking about Satanism. So maybe you should watch out if young children are listening in the background, or maybe somebody who might be a little sensitive about that. But John reached out to me, said he had some more information. You can see on YouTube, he's got this uploaded from his site about investigative leads about some of these characters involved in the finders. So John Brisson, welcome back to the show.
Thank you for having me, William. It's a pleasure to be on William Ramsey Investigates.
Cool, man.
I'm glad. Thank you for having me back.
Yeah, anytime.
I appreciate your research as a fellow researcher as well, and fellow brother in Christ. So it's great to be back on with you and to discuss the finders and some more information that I have found, of course, writing my book. And, as you as an author, as an investigative journalist yourself, searching out information and trying to get documents and trying to interview people and try to get them on the record, to see what their opinions are, or if they can give any information about what you're investigating, which is true investigative journalism. A lot of people really don't do it anymore, actually. Instead, they kind of just write a lot from newspaper articles, or just retell what other people have said instead of trying to figure out if it's true or not. There's a lost art of investigative journalism and being an author, I guess. But what you see in front of you is there was an investigative leads memo that was put out forth by investigative journalists, and he also ran the magazine Steam Shovel Press. Ken Thomas, he had released this investigative leads memo out to the public back during the late 90s on kind of like the message boards that were out there, the numerous message boards. That was before my time, but like the BB bulletin board message boards that were out there. And everything that a lot of researchers had got together to post their research on and corroborate their work together. But this is actually the investigative leads memo in and of itself, and parts of it that Ken Thomas had released, kind of like in this control, mail server newsletter type aspect. There are parts of it that were missing. This has never before been seen that has been published to my knowledge that I wanted to publish, in my book, and to come on your channel and also discuss it too as well with your audience, because this does give us more leads. This does give us more information. I know at the top it says that whoever had this investigative leads memo, they wrote that it had written by Finders Operation member Diane Sherwood. I'm not necessarily so sure on that. We really don't know whom wrote this memo. I discussed in my book that I was able to contact certain people and rule them out, like Daniel Brandt or investigative journalist Charles Solka, who said they did not write this memo. But we really don't know who wrote this memo. It could have been written by a Finders member, because some of the Finders groups splintered off after the 1987 Tallahassee incident, and actually kind of supposedly came against Marion Petty. And so maybe this could have been written by Diane Sherwood or a Finders member but I doubt it. I mean, this investigative leads memo has so much information in it, and I've spent a majority of my book trying to prove if it's true. And I can tell you that it does appear to be the case that it is true, at least from what I've seen and what I've been able to research. And, we have certain resources like newspaper articles, and there's the interview with Marianne Petty with Ken Thomas and author Lynn Bracken that was published in the Steam Shovel Press. And there's an article out there by investigative journalist Charles Soka, who knew members of the Finders before the 1987 incident. And a book by Finders operation member Toby Terrell, which is known as the Game Caller. And so you got to try to verify, okay, is what is an investigative leads memo, is what is put forth by these other people, including Marianne Petty himself. Can we back it up? Is it true? And yeah, somewhat I've been able to. Hopefully I'll continue finding more information. I've interviewed people. I would say that I can back up and show that 90% or more of this investigative leads memo is corroborated with what we know about the Finders. And so I just wanted to go over a little bit of it today with you and your audience, because it really does show Marianne Petty's connections to the United States military industrial complex and the United States Central Intelligence Agency.
So maybe we can just do, for people who didn't listen to part one, just do a brief overview, the Tallahassee incident, and kind of maybe do a little bit of background, and then we can go into this.
Yes. So in February 1987, there in a park in Tallahassee, Florida, Myers Park, there was a van that within the park that had two of the Finders operation members, who were Douglas Edward Ammerman and James Michael Hallowell. And with them were 6 kids that were of the Finders operation. There's a lot of misconception going around that they were trafficking those specific kids. No, they were kids of members of the Finders operation. That could be verified through news reports. And some of the Finders children themselves have gone on the record as adults. And so we do know that, for example, Michael Hollowell, supposedly his adopted or stepdaughter, not adopted, stepdaughter, should I say, was Mary or Jordan Rico, one of the oldest children that were there at the Myers Park incident. She was around the age of 6 or 7. So, these were kids from the Finders operation. And, they were disheveled at the park. They were dirty. They were unkempt. And so there was a concerned citizen, Cindy Johnson, who made the call to the Tallahassee Police Department about these children, because it's kind of odd to see like 2 well-dressed adults with, next to kind of like a sketchy white Ford van, with all of these disheveled and unkempt children, probably wearing poor clothing, or, maybe not having shoes, and they range from the ages of 6 to 1-year-old, so it's kind of like, okay, that's kind of odd. So they end up becoming arrested. And when the police, Tallahassee police, go to arrest them, they kind of like, they don't tell them, like Michael Howell just doesn't go, well, my stepdaughter is Jordan. I'm her, her stepfather. Like, they don't, give any reason why the kids are with them, right? They kind of just play mom is the word to the cops, and one of them kind of faints and like planks and everything, and they kind of give them a card that says that they are taking the kids to some special school in Mexico or something, so of course the cops looking at all this, they're like, okay, this is weird, and so they arrest Ammerman and Howell, and they take the kids into custody. So then, it ends up breaking news that this has happened. Okay. And then the Tallahassee Police Department contacts the United States Federal Bureau of Investigation, and then the FBI gets involved, and then the Customs Department gets involved because they believe that there's trafficking going on. And then that's when they start, investigating the finders, and they raid the W Street apartments that the finders had owned, and they raid the warehouse that the finders had owned in Washington, D.C., and they raid the Free State area, which was kind of near Culpeper, Virginia. It's like all this farmland that the different houses and stuff like that the finders operation had owned. And that's when, we get the infamous customs report by Ramon J. Martinez, a customs officer, about, the things that were discussed, that most people, when they read about the finders, they find that they have, alleged pictures of, of naked chicken and children. And they have, a book, which we'll discuss a little bit later, called The Execution of Henrietta and Igor, which were these goats that the fighters operation had on the Free State farmland. And that there's kind of like found, like, Ramon supposedly found like an album that had like a photo album that someone would have, and it has written on the top of it, "Execution of Henrietta and Igor." And so in these pictures, supposedly, were some of the fighters members dressed up in robes with the children as they're slaughtering the goats, okay, as they're killing the goats. All right. And Henrietta is pregnant, and they're open up the uterus, they're taking out the goat fetuses. Like, one of the kids have the head of a goat on a silver platter, and these kids are ranging from 6 to 1 or 2, and so the fire operations excuse for this is, well, it's just for them to have an experience of animal husbandry. Butchers and farmers back in the day used to have their kids butcher the animal. And I would say, well, yeah, but I don't think they would have a 1 or 2-year-old child there as they're butchering the animal, if all possible. Okay. Like, I understand that we've been
out of True Detective or something like.
Yeah, like, I understand that we're removed from the farm, in our modern lives, but even then, that seems a little bit too much of a stretch. And most of the people that try to downplay Goatgate, as they called it, like a finders operation member who I've written about on my Substack, Hunter Patch Adams. Yes, Hunter Doherty Patch Adams, the Patch Adams from the movie Patch Adams that Robert Williams played, okay, was a finders member. All right, and had very close relationship with Marion Petty and the finders operation, and where he got the money to try to build his free hospital, the Gesundheit Institute, came from a loan of Marion Petty, and Marion Petty gave him the mineral rights, which he sold to fund that hospital. Okay, so like, let me see if I can find
and then you proved Petty was like an intel guy connected to the CIA. So there's intel connections, there's real occultism, pedophilia, and I think in that truck in St. Petersburg, they had some kind of rudimentary online communication device, right? It was just
in Tallahassee. They were using TS computer devices to communicate each other through a private bulletin board, and their technology was kind of advanced for the time, but then again, not really. Like, I talked to Ramon J. Martinez, his partner on the record, Robert Harold, who was kind of like an IT guy for the Customs Department, and he discussed a lot of the technology that the finders had, and he said, yeah, it was pretty high tech for the average person to have this stuff, right? But it wasn't, some of it was not high tech either. Like, they had a mixture. There was a satellite dish that was found in the warehouse of the finders in Washington, D.C., where supposedly, according to Washington Metro Police Department officer John Stitcher, that they were allegedly shooting child pornography there at the warehouse. So, and again, one thing I do want to preface is something that I talk about in the book. I have a disclaimer at the beginning. We really don't know who's involved, because the fighters operation was a highly compartmentalized operation. We don't know exactly, unless I make specific statements, like we know fighters member Theodore Gregory Reese was convicted a few years ago on child pornography charges in his advanced age in his 80s. Okay. So that's something that I can say that he is a pedophile. He's a convicted pedophile. It's on the record. Okay. And in Maryland. All right. So that's, a claim that I can make that he is a pedophile. All right. But, since it's such a highly compartmentalized operation, we really don't know who was all involved in the intelligence operations, the trafficking, unless I make specific, note where that is the case of where it's where it has occurred. And I will say this too as well. We don't know if the 6 children in and of themselves that were found in the Tallahassee incident, if they were molested. Okay. Some of them have gone on the record and say that they were not. One of them, who I will not name, said that his childhood was pretty bad in the Finders. That's what he did go on the record for, and said that he does not want to discuss it because he will say this, he will go on the record for this, that it was not a good experience. Okay. So we have to make the claims with the evidence that we have, and the doctor who examined the children for sexual molestation, Dr. Moore, well, he's deceased. So it's not clear-cut evidence like it is in McMartin, with Mary Arico's possibly partially broken hymen, and I think it was I would say the child's name was it was Howell III, James Michael Howell III, Howell's son. They claimed that he may have had loose sphincter control, but they even mentioned that it could have been from constipation, which, my knowledge of digestive health, that really can't happen. Their diet was very poor vegan diet on whatever they can get, and occasionally they were rewarded with snacks. Okay, very rarely. Like, the kids' diet was atrocious. All right, so it would make sense that they were constipated. They had digestive issues. Okay. So I don't want to make claims about the Finders operation that I can't back up. And there's a lot of claims out there, but I will say that there is likely that, with the most confidence, I say 90% and 95% confidence, that they were working for United States intelligence agencies and non-government, non-governmental organizations,
NGOs, non-government organizations,
and corrupt local and state governments and maybe federal governments around the world, and a lot of it was them gathering intelligence and trying to corrupt the counterculture movement. That I can prove with a very high confidence. Now, the other stuff, as far as trafficking outside of those 6 kids, yeah, there's some definite evidence of that too was going on. Blackmailing of United States State Department diplomats and stuff like that and everything. There's proof of that. Them running a computer company to train CIA employees on informational technology. I can prove that with very much confidence too as well. So there are things that can't be proven. So you can't, and I would also say this too, preface this too, don't go harass the Finders members. First of all, it makes it difficult for any further research to be done, for one, and two, we really don't know who was involved in this, except I could say with confidence that Marion Petty, as being the leader of the Finders operation, working in tandem with intelligence agencies and the United States military-industrial complex and non-governmental organizations, likely knew a majority, if not all, of everything that went on with the Finders.
Right. So they had a central figure, and he came from military intelligence, right? World War
II. And we could talk about that in the investigative leads memo because it covers it on here. So it starts with Petty met Joseph Chang, a Chinese agent operating under journalistic cover in 1939, and remained in close contact with him throughout the war. Around this time, Petty also made connections with the OSS through George Varga, Earl Brody, and Nick Vonman, low-level OSS officers. Sometime near the end of the war, Chang introduced Petty to Charles E. Marsh at the National Press Club. Now, Petty actually later, I found documents where he was a registered member of the National Press Club in the late 80s and early 90s. And actually the Finders developed the National Press Club website that was used in the 90s. Okay, so they had infiltrated the National Press Club. And so, that's there's a lot of truth there that can be found. Marsh, who ran the best private intelligence network of his era, was an intimate of FDR, Henry Wallace, and later Lyndon Baines Johnson, became Petty's mentor and role model, shaping his career. Marsh's mentor and role model was Colonel Edward M. House. In the 1950s and 60s, Marsh provided funds for Petty to purchase hundreds of acres of farmland in Madison and Rappahannock counties in Virginia, near his estate in Culpeper County. Later, Petty arranged for William Yandell Elliott of Harvard University to purchase property adjacent to him in Madison County. So we do know that he's connected to Chang, because Toby Terrell mentions in his book, The Game Caller, about Chang and to discusses Petty's relationship with Joseph Chang. Okay. And so we know that is true. We know also because he's connected with Charles E. Marsh as well. Again, from The Game Caller, Toby Terrell, Marion Petty also mentions knowing Marsh. And as far as later on, it talks about who Petty chauffeured from. We know that's true, that he chauffeured Ira Aker. He chauffeured George C. Marshall, George Patton, G. Edgar
huge
Hoover.
Names, right?
Oh, very huge names, yes. When he was working for the Army Air Corps, because I found an obituary, and I think I shared it with the second stream on the fighters that we did, of his brother Russell Clinton Petty. Now, his brother Russell Clinton Petty was a chauffeur for the Army Air Corps. And what did he do? Well, he chauffeured around the same people his brother Marion Petty did. So who do you think got him the job? Marion Petty did. So, we can prove that. And also, I got a author, Lynn Bracken, on the record too as well in my book, who said that when he met Marion Petty showed him all of of his times of when he was a chauffeur, and it was well known that he chauffeured all these people, and showed him proof that was the case, of that's what he was doing for the Army Air Corps. Now, I put in for his veteran records. I should be able to get him because it's before 1975 and he's deceased. I hope I can. But that would further even prove. Now, I have some evidence off of Ancestry.com that proves that Marion Petty was up in the United States Air Corps because he got hospitalized for otis media, for an ear infection in the 1950s. Okay, so I do have that. I do have records that he was in the military. He was in the Army Air Corps, like he said he was. But these are his military connections. I mean, he even supposedly, according to him, through Toby Terrell book, The Game Caller, and I do believe this to be true based off of what Lynn Bracken said to me, he drove around presidents too, even before they became presidents, like LBJ, for example. And LBJ had an affair with Charles Marsh's wife. So it all connects. I mean, it's there.
Really fascinating. And this, something that adds veracity to this document, is actually the use on the six sentences down on this paragraph, is the use of the word talent spotter. That's a very known intel term for people to find people at law schools, elite colleges, and try to recruit them into some form of intel in a very broad sense. So that's a curious term just to see that.
And there is numerous connections between Marion Petty and the fighters in Georgetown University. I haven't written them all down yet. They will be later in my book. But there were people that stayed at the W Street apartments that were directly connected to Georgetown University. Marion Petty was supposedly received training and intel at Georgetown University. And so, and so there are people that were linked to Georgetown University. I think Reese, who was convicted for pedophilia, if I remember correctly, I might be mistaken on this, but if I remember correctly, he taught computer science at Georgetown University in the 90s.
Wow. Didn't the author of Tragedy and Hope teach at Georgetown during that time? If my memory serves me correct, maybe it was Harvard. I don't know. What was his name?
What's his name? Carol?
Carol, yeah.
Is it Carol? Carol Quigley, yeah. I don't know if he
because he was Clinton's teacher, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, okay.
Taught Clinton when Clinton was at Georgetown, yeah.
And so,
Georgetown
of course,
University professor and historian Carol Quigley, yes.
And Georgetown itself is a well-known it's spook school. I mean, lack of other words, intelligence school. So,
and Quigley published Tragedy and Hope in 1966. So it's just right around this time he's probably teaching their 50s and 60s.
Yeah, I mean, these connections, if I could find any more, especially it was really a big connection about Petty's brother doing effectively the same thing that Marion did, and I mean, that was a big find there in and of itself because it proves investigative leads memo to further be true. And so it talks about which you had me on my channel to discuss Barbara Marks Hubbard, and Barbara Marks Hubbard has numerous connections to the finders. And here we have one of the founding members of the World Future Society, Edward Cornish, being mentioned that Marion Petty helped found the World Future Society with Roy Mason and John Nasbitt. Well, we know Roy Mason, who was a pedophile, who was a homosexual pedophile. He was a famous architect. He worked with the World Future Society. He was a futurist. He worked with Barbara Marks Hubbard. There are numerous connections between the finders and Roy Mason and Hubbard that can be looked through just various news articles and Toby Charles' book, The Game Caller. So I mean, the more I look into this investigative leads memo, the more it turns out to be true. I mean, you have Christopher Bird down here.
It
and
looks
he
totally legit to me. Totally legit.
Yeah, I mean, Christopher Bird, you have Theodore Reese, which in many of the, he's a convicted pedophile. He talks about him being a Reston-based computer programmer who was very an active member of Werner Erhardt's seminar EST training, which, Lee Veltman would talk a lot about, and kind of their kind of a pyramid, almost mind control type aspect for the new age is what it was. But it's quite interesting that a lot like Michael Versace Rios, I write about him. There's numerous, there's interviews that he's, news articles. This investigative journalist Charles Soka says that he's a member of the finders and knew that he was with them. And he was very much into open up these free love type communities. He's a polyamorous and a polygamist. And still, you find interviews of him pushing polyamory and polygamy and free love out there. And his mother, actually, I think, was she the author that the television show The Flying Nun was based off? I think she wrote the book, if I remember correctly. And so, I mean, what do you think about this memo? It seems pretty.
It looks totally legit to me. Yeah, it looks totally legit because those are all people, players, and they're showing connections. Like, I don't know who put that together, but
we still don't know.
Yeah.
And of course, some of the people that are listed down here, which I'm still doing research on, one of the people that's very interesting is a gentleman named Ivan Illich, who they write as a New Age figure. Charles Soka mentioned that the finders were connected to Ivan Illich, and I couldn't prove that. And then Ivan Illich had a school down there in Mexico. Remember that the finders, when Douglas Edward Almerman and James Michael Hellwell were caught by the Tallahassee police, they gave them a card saying they were taking the kids down to a special school in Mexico. Well, Ivan Illich had a special school down there in Mexico. He was a Roman Catholic priest. Some people say that he was a Jesuit. He also wrote one of the famous books on what kind of like a modern approach to education called I think it was the Schooling Society. And he interestingly enough, I got telexes of the finders, private messages between them, and they discuss their relationship with Ivan Illich in that telex, and that he was visiting them and doing conferences that the finders were holding. So I was able to prove that Ivan Illich is, again, associated with the finders, just like Charles Sokol said he was, just like this memo said it was. And this part right here of this listed people, the memo that we had cut off here. It didn't have the rest of this list down there. and it cut off at this first paragraph. Now I'm trying to find this original Loudoun County News article that they reference that has all this information about the finders in it. I've not been able to find that. It's not on newspapers.com. It's probably lost to the ether. I have no idea where it's at, William. If I can find that article, it'd be very interesting to see what it says, because that's supposedly, the person wrote, this leads, and they claim this to be kept strictly confidential. They wrote this investigative leads memo to whomever wrote that article. So I wish I knew what that article said. But they also talk about that Petty may have been connected to Al-Banan Knight. Well, Al-Banan Knight's connected to the Secret Right, to the John Birch Society, and into the Council for National Policy. So that's another avenue of something that needs to be investigated.
The classical old name for England, right? Perfidious Albion. That's Albion Knight. Wow. These are amazing. Yeah, and they actually mentioned Andrew Weil, who has all kinds of strange connections going all the way back to Leary, Harvard, LSD studies, all kinds of stuff.
That's something I'm trying to find out right now, if I can substantiate any connection to Andrew Weil, because that would be huge, but I haven't found one yet outside of this memo.
That they mentioned Billy Hitchcock in there too, right? Because that's where
that is correct. Yes,
Leary went. Yeah, I saw that name. So
this guy named Walt Schneider was a Navy intelligence officer and was Timothy Leary and Billy Hitchcock's private pilot. Now, Willard Paulson is actually mentioned in Toby Terrell's book, The Game Caller, kind of like this drug addict that hung out with the finders. But he is mentioned there. Ken Keyes. I wrote a whole recent blog on my Substack last week on Ken Keyes, and I can okay, now this is where I can prove that this is true on this. All right, so they kind of get mixed up here when they say it's no, it's not Ken Keyes. Okay, never mind. Yeah, it's Ken Keyes, but they say one of the releases of the investigative leads memo has it long. It says Ken Kesey. Now, Ken Kesey is a completely different person than Ken Keyes. Okay, but Ken Keyes Jr., who did found the living love, he worked at Esalen a lot. He actually had workshops at Esalen Institute. Okay, he's a major New Ager. Okay, Toby Terrell writes in his book The Game Caller that his wife Carolyn Terrell edited Keyes' first book, Handbook of Consciousness. Okay, I found on the Handbook of Consciousness website where Ken Keyes thanks Carolyn Terrell for editing. So Toby told the truth there. Okay, and the Game Caller, Keyes says that he knows Petty very well and that he's a fellow Zen master. So I mean, most of these, hopefully I can prove almost every one of these connections if possible. What do you know about Ken Keyes? You were going to mention something about him.
Well, I know Ken Kesey. I don't know who Ken Key is, but I'm interested if you came across anything about, they mentioned the Meta Network cult in Arlington. Do you come across anything like that?
Nothing yet, no.
Because these names are all like names from the 60s, right? They're all kind of 60s overlapping. But you can probably find some of these names like Willard Paulson in any bio of Timothy Leary, see who he really is. Because it just, all the background and connections to me have all those networks, like the New Age, Palo Alto, Silicon Valley types, the behavior modification people. These are all people in that mix. Like, I'm just waiting for the word MK Ultra to pop up, like some kind of CIA kind of subgroup or operation or something like that.
Well, it did in the Ramon J. Martinez's report that they found manuals on mind control in the finder's warehouse, I believe, or the W Street Apartments, one of the locations. Wow. So, I'm sure the connections are there.
Yeah, but I mean, if this behavior modification guy is still around, Stephen Peltz or Belts, like that's an interesting one. I want to see if that guy's.
That's actually part of the book I'm writing on right now. Is Belts, and let's see what little bit of information I have on him. He had a television show called Ask Dr. Belts in Philadelphia. He was once on the Johnny Carson show. He had a private psychology practice. He wrote at least 3 books. One of them was How to Make Johnny Want to Behave. He went to a psychology conference once in Boston, and Baba Ram Dass gave him some LSD. I really need to dig in more to Belts. I think there's something there. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. These guys are very interesting. This is kind of like a little breadcrumb trail of just connections going all the way back. It reminds me of what's the guy, the dark research guy. What's his name? He does a lot of stuff on Silicon Valley because a lot of those guys were into New Age stuff too. It was what's the dark journalist? Have you ever heard of that guy?
They still, they're still involved in that today. A lot of them are involved into the occult, into New Age, especially Peter Thiel, Palantir, and I mean, with all these connections, how could have Marion Petty not controlled some elements of the counterculture for the CIA, or at least reported to them information that he was getting from all these prominent people within the counterculture movement? Barbara Marx Hubbard, Ken Kesey Jr., Stephen, Belts, Carl Shapley,
Hitchcock, Leary. Hitchcock was probably some type of intel intermediary to advance the counterculture through the Mellon family, which he was part of. All those guys probably got funds or were fronts. I wouldn't be surprised if they found out if Hitchcock was an intel front.
Yeah. The Mellon family is quite interesting because in the modern area, they got a lot of ties to cryptocurrency and Bitcoin. One of the biggest things I've been trying to, a lot of people are saying it's Ken Kesey. It's not Ken Kesey. It's Ken Kesey Jr. Is Living Love is whom the finders were connected with. They were not connected with Ken Kesey.
You can pull him up. He actually was a guru, personal growth author and lecturer, author of Living Love. Maybe you could probably bring that up to the stream. Ken Kesey Jr. So he was some kind of big name. Pathways to Higher Conscious. He has all the lingo down. Wrote 15 books on personal growth and social consciousness issues, selling 4 million copies. So he was definitely
Esalen Institute.
Wow.
Had his own cornucopia, like his own intentional community. He wrote numerous books on New Age and on human potential and on the law of attraction.
There you go. He's got it all.
So he's a major
Living
New
Love
Age
Center in Berkeley. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Shakti Gawain. Wow, I know her name. She was a full-on New Ager. Retreat in Santa Cruz. Oh yeah, he's all over there.
Have you ever came across Mankind Research Unlimited?
No.
Okay, and Carl Schleisler. So
hold on just one sec. This guy Ken Kesey, his major influence, or the person who he influenced the most, was Wayne Dyer. So he says Kesey literally got me started on this glorious transformational journey. So the guy Wayne Dyer, if you people know his name, he's all over the place in this kind of New Age stuff. Oh, he actually passed away in 2015. I didn't know that. But he was huge. Yeah, he was a huge kind of New Age.
So as you can see, Marion Petty. If Marion Petty had a role in setting up all these people, Barbara Marx Hubbard, Ken Kesey Jr., all these people, then he had, major, he was a major puppet, that the CIA was using. And of course, Marion Petty was probably using his, steering, these movements as the game caller and of himself, had his own, as a chaos magician, his own freedom somewhat to kind of puppet these things. As he saw fit, and working. A lot of people ask, well, why would Marion Petty even work with the military-industrial complex or the intelligence agencies? And it's because they afforded him money and freedom. The fighters were they were millionaires in the late 80s. So he got to do whatever he wanted, pretty much. I mean, there were some things he had to take orders from the intelligence agencies, the military industrial complex, but he got to live out, do it that Wilt mentality. That was the mentality of the finders. And so,
Right.
it goes with the territory.
That's incredible. Yeah, it's really the connections are just an incredible web. Those are all very accomplished people, most of them. It's really something else. Oswald's asking you if you know if the finders had as many connections in Boston as they did to DC.
Not to my knowledge, no. They had connections in the Soviet Union, the USSR, which there were many passport stamps even for Marion Petty that he was able to go into the USSR during the 50s through the 80s. So that should tell you something right then and there, that he was able to freely travel in the USSR and North Korea too.
Interesting.
They had a base somewhere in California. I want to say San Diego. And they had an operative operation base in Hawaii too. But I think it's San Diego. I'd have to go back and look at somewhere in California. They had one. So they had the Free State in Virginia, farmland in the northern part of Virginia, near Nethers, Virginia. They had the Washington, D.C. W Street Apartments, the Washington, D.C. warehouse. They had properties in California. They had properties in Hawaii, and they may have had properties or some sort of vast relationship with the USSR.
It's incredible. It really is. Just like some kind of Lombardi art piece of connections and lines being drawn between things. Right?
I just don't see how anybody say that he can't be involved in intelligence.
Yeah, I think you're right. He has all of the aspects of intelligence, and even this whole organization, the compartmentalization, is very knowing. It's also an intelligence indicator. Just the fact that it's all compartmentalized. People don't know that much about each other. It shows that somebody's thinking about it. Somebody's intentionally, knowingly compartmentalizing and putting that together.
Yeah, very much so. I mean, that's how you run an operation, right? And with Marion Petty, it was maximum chaos. He would claim that the women ran the finders operation, which we know definitely is not true. Or he even goes as far as to say sometimes the kids ran the finders operation. The 7 kids, we know that's not true. So he even wrote. Let's see here, when he after the events of 1987, he delegated someone I guess we could talk about right now. He said that the leaders of the finders should either be between Hunter Patch Adams, Stephen A. Weitzman, Esquire, who's a lawyer for the finders, or Dr. Carl Shapley, that the finders should elect them as co-leaders altogether, or one of them is a leader as one of them. So he writes to the Tallahassee Democrat. This is supposedly a memo written by Marion Petty that was hand delivered. I didn't know I was the leader of the finders. That's the first thing he says. Second, he goes, I thought I was just a consultant on wit and humor. And then he says, if I ever was a leader, I hereby resign to devote myself full time to Zen walking. And I recommend that the finders hold an election as soon as possible and elect Dr. Hunter Patch Adams, Stephen A. Weitzman, Esquire, and Dr. Carl Shapley as co-leaders.
Wow. It has kind of like the vibe of what is it? Not the Chaos Magicians. It's the Discordian Society.
Yeah.
It's all a big joke, and you lie to the public and put out false connections, and like even this thing is total intel stuff, fake falling out and pretending to be enemies type stuff. Like they put all that chaff out into the public. That's like classic ON. Like they've integrated stuff like that in the ONA.
Yep. We see that with a lot of things that people fake being enemies, like Trump and the Clintons, for example. I don't think they were friends for decades, and all of a sudden now they're not friends anymore. At one time in the 2016 election period, I believe that. Now I'm not so sure.
Dude, I think both elections of Bush in 2000 and 2004, those were fall guys. Both Gore and Kerry were known to. They were meant to take the fall. They were put in that place to lose, in my opinion. So it's like fake fighting. Wow. And did you want to show a video in the pre-show. We
Yeah,
have a
we'll
video.
play.
Do you want to
So let me discuss Shapley, and I'll play a
Okay,
video,
go.
and then
Okay.
just to go. So I guess one interesting person is Carl Shapley. Now his father was Harlow Shapley, and his mother was Martha Shapley. They were both famous astronomers, and Harlow was actually director of the Harvard College Observatory. Towards the end of World War II, Harlow was a co-founder of UNESCO, and later lobbied for the eventual establishment of the National Science Foundation. Uh, Carl's brother Lloyd Shapley was a famous game theorist, a Nobel Prize winner in economics, who was drafted in the United States Army Air Corps during World War II and worked for the Rand Corporation for decades. Carl was a director of philosophy on ontology and education. He was a noetic scientist and a self-proclaimed first-century Gnostic. Carl stated in a defining moment interview with AJ Ray, maybe I'm a little bit closer to Dan Brown when he writes about things, not only about the Da Vinci Code, but how the sciences have restricted our vision about what is going on. Carl became an ontologist through the Christian Science cult. Carl was a certified class taught healer of the Christian Science Mother Church. And he mentioned that Mary Baker Eddy was his mentor, and we're about to play some of the things that he's said about that.
Wow.
He also was an ambassador of peace for the Unification Church Front organization, the Universal Peace Federation. Okay. So we know that Carl Shapley was working closely with the Finders organization or operation because of many because Marion Petty says in that memo that Carl Shapley would take over him as leader of the Finders. Okay, that's one. Two, the media then started getting Carl Shapley on the record. Okay, and Carl Shapley was like, yeah, I've been working with Marion Petty very closely. At least we know for the 1987, 1986 year. We don't know before then. I would assume before then. But he talks about how he visits the Finder operations at least once a month. So that's a close relationship. All right. And he discusses them and says they're generous, wonderful people who are very benevolent. They perform a lot of practical jokes and poke fun at the majority. Carl states that members of the final operations have gotten such weird press and that needs to be turned around to who they really are. Carl continues, for instance, sometimes they may say the children are in charge today, and the adults get down on their hands and knees and do what the children say. Carl also mentions that Marion Petty is referenced as the game caller. Carl continues further about Marion. He's one of the eccentrics of our time, a total benevolent and benign man. Now, remember, he says the fighters are benevolent and benign. He says Marion Petty is benevolent and benign. But then he goes on to say he is like a character out of Alice in Wonderland. I think he can be the Mad Hatter sometimes. And I think he could be the Rabbit sometimes. And I think he could be the Red Queen sometimes. Well, wait a minute. He just said that Marion Petty and the fighters were benevolent, but the Red Queen was the major antagonist in Alice in Wonderland and was evil and a despot, a tyrannical ruler. So that doesn't add up logically. And then he goes, he has a kind of a twinkle in his eye all the time. Finally, Carl mentioned that he was angry at the reports that children on the Finders Operation Free State properties in Virginia were frequently heard by neighbors screaming. Anyone who knows children knows when they are delighted, they scream.
Wow. That's crazy.
So this is what he says about Goatgate in and of itself, okay, about the execution of Henrietta and Igor, okay? He goes, it's simply like any farm. They slaughter animals. The fact they made a game out of it, I thought it was in poor taste. That's being picked up by the police as something satanic. That's not the case. Rather, it's in poor taste, but it's not cultish.
Right. They're just that's total BS cult language, too, convincing the public the exact opposite of what they're doing, right? Doesn't that sound like that?
Yeah.
To you? Yeah.
I mean, to me, it seems satanic to, the name of the photo album was Execution. The execution. It wasn't the butchering for food of Henrietta and Igor. And then, they're wearing these robes, which they claim it was white robes to keep themselves clean, which I can understand if you're butchering an animal, you want to keep yourself clean, right? But then were they really wearing white robes? And then, like I said earlier, they're cutting open the fetuses and having the kids do all these with knives that are very young and presenting. There's a picture of one of the kids with the cut off head of a goat on a silver platter. You know, this isn't animal husbandry. What is this?
Right.
You know, it seems occultish to me. A bit, may I say, satanic, but it's at least traumatizing to those children.
Yeah, no doubt. No doubt. There's so much occultism involved in this whole thing. Just the fake findings, the connections, the occult book authors, the mind control. Those are all standard kind of things in almost all of these groups. This is like an early process church to me. Like all these weird connections and all these hidden people and social engineering and social programming and secrecy. There's probably some hierarchy we just don't know about in the finders. Would you agree with that?
No, we know that there is.
Okay.
There's two groups that are called the Crazies and the Zanies. Now, the Crazies were the inner circle of the Finders group. Okay, that would be Marion Petty, Finders member Toby Terrell, possibly Finders member, supposedly at different times. Toby Terrell is a right-hand man. At different times, it was supposedly a gentleman named Stanley Burns. So you know, there were people that were the inner circle of the Finders. Now, outside of that was a group called the Zanies. Now, that was Hunter Patch Adams' group, okay? And they were circled, you know, and then they would throw parties together and hang out together and stuff like that and everything. Now, investigative researcher Charles Soka says that it was well known that the inner circle of the Finders, that many of the members were pedophiles. Now, I don't know who it was in there. And I can also tell you that they would take women, sometimes underage, at the DC bus stop under the guise of feminism, would take them. And even Toby Terrell writes about this, but he kind of gussies it up and colors it up a little bit, and would take them back to the W Street apartments for them to get high, okay, and then try to coerce them to have an orgy with the Finders group, or sometimes just have sex with Marion Petty by himself. And Marion Petty, not to be graphic, said, you know, in the interview with, I think it was an interview with Ken Thomas and Lynn Bracken, I prefer young pussy to old pussy. Okay. So, you know, they were taking these women. Now, of course, if the women were, you know, over age, you know, they were over the age of 18, and they, you know, they wanted to have sex because it was the era of free love or whatever. You know, I'm not going to say that those women were, you know, specifically all of them were coerced, you know, into to rape. But any of the girls that were under the age of 18, for example, that would be statutory rape. Now, some people say, well, John, it was just a different time. And I'd say, well, no, it's not just because it was a different time. They were bringing them into an operation, into a cult, and then through peer pressure and drug use, which would lower a person's inhibitions, to get them to have orgies. That's disgusting. It's degenerate behavior, and it's horrific. Now, I don't know who was all involved in those orgies, but it was going on. So,
and when do you think that the Finders? When do you think that this arc of the group was active? It was after World War II, the 50s and 60s to the late
60s.
70s?
The 60s is when Marion Petty started gathering people for the Finders operation, and it started to break apart after Goatgate, 1987. There were still members that stayed on until Marion Petty's death in the late 2000s, but it's kind of broke apart. The Crazies, the central group, broke apart then.
It's amazing. I mean, you just see that these activities of these kind of cult groups goes farther back than the present. Yeah, do you want to play this video of this guy?
Yes, this is Carl Shapley. Real quick, I think you're going to find this part very interesting in the Defining Moment interview, William. So I'm going to play that for everybody.
And there was.
I say, you asked me what had been the first one thing to move me there.
Yes.
Then the science and the Christianity, and for her, Christianity was a beautiful thing. I'm just saying, I'm sorry, with crusades and witch hunting, I can't agree with that. But to her, it was a beautiful thing, and her version of it was a beautiful thing. And her version of science, again, was 1860s and 1870s, and you didn't have, you know, the technology or the quantum of today then, but she intuited these things. So she was a great.
This is him talking about Mary Baker Eddy.
That. Wow. In my early years, It's only much later when I say, thank you for the foundation. I'm going to build on it. Not as an ego. I'm just going to build on it conceptually. And at that point, then you realize that we had Alice Bailey, and with the Theosophists, you had Blavatsky and these others who had done lots of good work and along those lines, and brought in masters from other dimensions. They haven't gone anywhere. They just aren't here in body. And so you got DK, Katumi, and all these, and the Master Saint Germain began to speak to me. So that's how I came closer to the world of the esoteric side than I had been before. And Christ, after all, is a Greek and term, and it's a Jewish Messiah that's going to come. So it's both Greek and Jewish, and then it became, of course, Christian. And then later on, dear blessed Muhammad brought him in as one of their prophets. And so there should be a unity to all of this rather than the fighting and the diversity. So I've said enough. I'm getting a little bit polemic.
Well, that exposes a lot about his views.
Yep, it really does.
And
later,
Bailey, and Eddie, they've all done great work.
And he talks about being possessed by Saint Germain, the ascended master Saint Germain, and that leading him further into occultism. And I mean, Carl Shapley isn't just like some dude. I mean, his parents were very high up. He actually met Albert Einstein as a child. Albert Einstein would come visit his parents at Harvard, and he talks about that too as well during this interview. And there's a picture of him as a child with Albert Einstein. So Carl Shapley just wasn't just, this is a guy who greatly respected the finders, obviously, and worked with them.
Wow. It's incredible. That's incredible. Just the connections, like you just see all of this kind of the intellectual history of kind of the New Age and the occult coming through this, and then taking shape through the finders, and Petty kind of being the game changer, right? Or game caller. What is he?
Game caller, yeah.
Game caller, yeah. It's interesting. Isn't that what they call the guy who heads the prison gang? Is it the game caller or game shooter? Yeah, it's something.
I think so, yeah. Yeah.
I think it is. There's which I think is fitting, like that overlapping of the terminology. Like I'm going to game call and send all these people out.
Because life is a game to him.
What's that?
So life is a game to Marion Petty. It's a game that he believes he can call the shots.
Right. Well, I mean, we're at about an hour, John. How would you like to wrap this up? I mean, anything you'd like to add, or how do you want to do that? Mention your book.
Not really. I do have the Substack where I'm, posting 1 or 2 blogs a week, trying to finish up my book. Almost got chapter 2 done. It's only about $5 a month or $50 for a year subscription. And anybody who purchases a year subscription will get a PDF copy of the book when it is completed. It's took a lot of research. I mean, I got to get it done. I can't put everything I want to in the book, obviously, because it would be 800, 900 pages at that point. And I would never be done. Like if it was in the book, I could write a whole book on Barbara Marx Hubbard. I mean, I got to cut off sometimes, you as an author, eventually you just got to cut it off. You can't just keep adding stuff. Yeah. And so, it's been a while. I mean, I've spent hundreds of hours in research and writing and everything on this. And, sometimes I get analysis paralysis. Me and George from cavdead.org talk about it sometimes, and that, you kind of gets overwhelming a lot of the times, so it kind of makes you kind of numb where you can't really continue, and you also want to be right, or at least you want not necessarily right, but you want to be able to prove what you believe. And so, sometimes you you kind of wait to see if anything pops up later that may prove, what your beliefs are, or, and if what you believe is disproven, then, you tell the contrary of it, and that's what a lot, this book, a lot of people are going to come against me because I'm only writing about what I can prove. If I can't prove it, I can't, do I think that the fighters' operation of itself was nefarious and they were doing numerous things like gathering intelligence and collecting intelligence and steering the counterculture and likely trafficking, and there were satanic elements involved in it? But yeah, I do. But how much of that can truly be proven? It's not
Right,
an easy thing.
but you can make those connections between a lot of these people, right? So
Yes.
just
Yes,
by
very much
saying
so,
that
yes.
they're connected is really kind of the beginnings of the pre-60s counterculture, really. The post-war beginnings, the beginnings of what happened in the 60s was all there in the 50s through the finders. A lot of the finders connections there. I think that's
Yeah.
true.
I mean, with your
I
own
mean,
research too, as well. I mean, it's definitely connected to. I mean, when they say that Marion Petty may have been one of the main controllers of the counterculture movement, of the human potential movement, I don't see how that's not true.
right.
He either did it of his own volition or he did it for intelligence agencies. And what we know through Dave McGowan's work, Laurel Canyon, it's likely because of intelligence agencies he did this.
Culture creation, culture. They were interested in all that stuff. Social engineering, cultural jamming, cultural engineering. All that stuff was being financed. It's all was being, there was money bandied around. And it's, the people say it's the CIA, but the CIA is the old line families, and the old line families are all over this thing with Hitchcock and some of these other characters. So it's,
One last thing, William. Is there anything that you'd want me to maybe look out for through all your research?
I mean, I guess it's, you just look for the occultism. I mean, there's obviously the occultism in this whole thing with the goats and stuff like that, but really kind of the ideas of what they're trying to do. I would suspect they're probably trying to condition those kids or the children into whatever they were trying to do. They were trying to do incredible stuff back then in the 50s and 60s, whether to create, fractured kids, or actually they were trying to find really intelligent kids and shape them over long periods of time. So the whole finders thing could have been part of something like that, like things that are top secret that the public will never ever know. It seems like that's what these guys were involved in, is really top secret type stuff.
Well, investigative journalist Wendell Minnick stated that the finders to him expresses their philosophy with two mottos, including the name of the game is do what thou wilt and maximum freedom, minimum guilt.
Wow, that's incredible.
So that should be enough from a cultish do what thou wilt.
Yeah, I mean, it's right
standpoint.
there. It's right there. Wow. Yeah, that's amazing. I mean, great research, John. Thanks so much for sharing. And
thank you.
Where can people reach out to you? Where's the best place?
You guys can find me on my YouTube channel. We've read the documents. Hopefully I'll have you again later this month, William, too as well. And you can find me Weave_Red on Twitter. And then, my Substack, just search for We've Read. It'll pop up. You'll see the work that I've done on the finders. And hopefully I'll continue putting out, as I'm writing the book, more information. And hopefully more information will come my way. If anybody wants to contact me, there any information they have about the finders, we've read the documents at protonmail.com. Lord knows I don't know everything.
Right.
And
there's
a lot of people have helped me.
Trails to follow just in that one document. Just figuring out who those people are and getting all their details too is really, people can help out. People can do some of their research and share it too. So
yes,
I can help
very much
share
so.
it with me and share it with you. So again, it's your YouTube, Twitter, and Substack. I'll include those in the show notes for podcasts so people can click on the link. And I'll put that into the description under YouTube. So again, it's John Brisson. We've read the documents, Finders Part 2. Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you, Wayne.
All right, take care. Stay there.